I didn't mention that John Riley. I didn't mention, and I should have mentioned, that the first post office in the village was in 1835. It's unbelievable, and it's so sad that here we are living in 2013, and there isn't a post office in the bridge, and there was a post office here in 1835. But anyway, the first post office was over in the Derrygara Inn. It was then in John Riley's, and he held it from 1835 until 1874. The next post office then was up in a house in Corn Smiths in Agadez. It was run by John and Rose Mulligan. Now, we're not connected to the Mulligans up in Derrygara. I don't know who the relations were. And from 1874, it left the Derrygara, went up to Agadez. It was in Agadez from 1874 until 1892. And then from 1892, it was here, and this was the post office. And this was run by a Mary and a Bernard Fitzpatrick, and they're related to the Fitzpatricks of Kilnalek. And they were also related to a family over in Germany called, what's his name? I'll think of it in a minute. It was a priest and a family. Gilhooly, Father Gilhooly. And one of the Fitzpatricks married a Gilhooly. I think Mrs. Gilhooly, she was formerly Gilhooly. But they ran the post office here from 1892 to 1906. And then an ex-OIC man, policeman, he served in the village for 6 years. I don't know where he was transferred, and he came back in 1906, and he was the postmaster here until 1912. And then until 1919. And then from 1919 until 1981, it was in the family originally of Bogans, and Miss Bogan then married Mr. Lane, T.J. Lane. I think he was from Limerick, whose son then we all have warm memories of, and that's Seamus Lane. And we used to it was a great place for Cayley, and it was the centre of crack here and villainy for years, down the years, and we all had some unbelievable evenings of crack. He was a single man, and he was very fond of minding his money and talking about the need to mind it, and and he was a very, very, very nice man.
Can I just say something about him?
You can, yeah. Tell me.
Just one little thing that I remember about Seamus and James and Paddy and that vintage would remember that Seamus used to have a lovely box of outspan oranges on the floor when you'd go in, and as soon as the crowd of us would go in, he'd be talking away, but he'd come out from behind the counter and he'd lift the box of oranges and he'd put it inside the counter. And I'd say to Seamus, Seamus, why did you move the box of oranges when we came in? Well, he said, it's like this, he said, I trust everyone, but I tempt no one.
And that was a fair reflection of his character.
It was a fair reflection of his tying down.
Just on the post office, the funny thing about I came across, there's a postal story in Mullingar whom I know, and he came across a postmark, stamped to see on an envelope, and it's from 1840 from Butler's Bridge. But on it is so the postal authorities had it down as Butler. It wasn't Butler's. They had it down as Butler Bridge. Something incidental. So the other thing about here, just for a little bit of interest, is that this is the only, during the Second World War, the lanes, he was a very careful man, and this would reflect in this story too. It's the only place that we know of in the whole locality that had an air raid shelter. I mean, as if the Germans were thinking for what about there on the bridge? He's a danger to the campaign. So they had an air raid shelter here at the back of the house. I asked Geraldine lately, did she ever investigate where it was, and I don't know where it is. But just to talk about the village at the time, before we go any further, in the 1800s, the main coach, we were on the N3, which is the third most important road. The most important road is from Dublin to Belfast, the second from Dublin to Cork, and the third most important was from Dublin to Enniskillen. And the reason that this place was so busy was because we were on the third most important road. And the mail coach was coming through. We have a record of the mail coach going through here from 1768. Like that's, I don't know how many years ago that is. And it will have gone through at least twice a day. So the villagers here were used to all this traffic going through. And the railways didn't come to Cavan until 1862. And so this was a very busy place. The mail coach used to obviously bring the mail. I don't know how they dispensed it or how they delivered it at that time. 1882 there was only a rural post. There was sent out a man on foot from here to Clover Hill, and in 1889 there was one to Doratus. And there were McLaughlins from up the road. They were the post lady, and the Pattersons in the village here were postmen. But just to mention about those mail coaches, there was two of them went through twice daily. In 1802, a writer wrote of the village. He said there was not one slated house in the village. This man was a fellow called Charles Coote Bart. He said that the cabins give it but a mean appearance. So he didn't probably think much of the village at that time. In 1837, there's a reference of a fair day being held here every second Monday throughout the year. In 1835, we know that there was a post office here. No, it was around the corner. It was over at the Derrygara. And we know that there were 3 pubs in the village. There was one where Collins' it was owned by Wallace's. The one where Tommy's was owned by a family called Brady, and we know that John Riley had a pub here. In the 1840s, we know that there was an ORIC station, which we'll come to in a minute, up the street here. And we know across here there was a pound yard. The chapel was built in a pound yard. And the pound yard was if you didn't pay your fine that you were levied, and they go and seal whatever they seal, a donkey or a cart or an animal of some description from you, and they put it into the pound yard. And also it was a place for keeping stray animals. And so it was a very lively village. There would have been a lot of the mail coach going through, animals up and down, the pound yard, you had the police in the street, and you had a huge population by comparison with now. In 1821 there was 195,000 people in the county of Cavan. In 1841 there was nearly 250,000 in the county of Cavan. In 1861 it was down to 150, and in 1871 it was down to 140. But the population, and I don't know what the population of County Cavan is now, it's probably about 65 or 70,000. There's only a quarter of the people living in the county that there was in those days. So it's kept a bit colder, we might move on.